Chad, can you hear?
What city are you in, Chad?
Yeah, Chad, you can hear, right, Chad? Thumbs up.
26 people.
I'm in Indianapolis for
I've
the
heard
day
of-
job at the or the auditors conference.
I sent it to you.
Mhm.
I think he's in California.
Okay, thank you.
You talking about Chad or Andy? Andy's in California, yeah.
He'll join us down here.
I know that. Maybe do that. I need to write it. Mhm. I wasn't gonna lead with that. Okay. I think there's some.
You can figure it out.
For me.
It's June, a week, a month. We meet the rule of 85.
Yep.
2.5 years left on.
Steve will have utility expenses.
Can you hear us, Andy?
He's muted.
Okay, you're muted. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Sorry, I
Welcome.
didn't see that email come through until just now.
Steve, do we need to officially call to order?
Yeah, if we want to call this meeting to order and I'll let whoever wants to run with it, run.
I think Shannon's gonna give an introduction.
I'll give a brief overview. This has now been, 6-7 months in the works. And everybody should have a copy of the report. If you do not, Susan has a couple of extras. We've had numerous generations of this report with different scenarios and kind of filling in some gaps and making sure all costs were covered. And what we settled on was running a couple of different scenarios. So Andy ran a 80% capacity assumption, a 95% capacity assumption, and a 50% capacity assumption, and showed us what the dollars and cents looked like based on his research and details. And at 80% capacity, the facility would run and generate $124,500. At 95% capacity, the facility would actually generate $890,500. The 50% capacity actually is a net loss for the county of $1,518,500. And so with all of the assumptions that you see in that report, what we really need to understand is what capacity we could expect to run at. I had that conversation a couple of times with Andy. Some of the facilities that we compared to run at different capacities for different reasons. I believe if you average them all together, Susan has done that. She can share that information. They have an average capacity rate. The one thing that Andy and I had talked about a great deal is everybody he talked to said, you absolutely need to do this. This is the need is great. There, you will have
Mhm.
folks bringing juvenile to this facility if you open it. And in my opinion, that's great. We never really doubted the need. We doubted the dollars, and the report, in my mind, provided us with the dollars we were asking for. So with that, I will let Susan share her response.
I think after going through the report that Andy created several times, it did seem like capacity was the critical factor. And I met with the CEO of the YOC in Delaware County to just pick his brain. And he showed me the average daily population of each of the 17 detention centers. And it struck me that they all run at a very low capacity. So even though there is a great need, they're all very underutilized. And so I was talking that through with him, and was finally able to understand what you all maybe already understand, but this kind of segregation requirements of the facilities are very complex as far as separating kids based on different needs. And so in Delaware County, they don't really have a boys' side and a girls' side. They have 6 different centers, pods, whatever you want to call them. I don't know what the capacity of each is, but he told me at that time they had one of those 6 with just one juvenile in them. Actually, two of them just had one juvenile, and then the other 4 were being used at different capacities. And so he was helping me understand that smaller detention centers will never operate near capacity because of these complex requirements for segregating kids. And then the other issue is being able to get staffing. And so even if on one day your segregation requirements aren't as complicated, you can't just fill it full of kids that you don't have the same, and then increase beyond staffing that you would need that you didn't when you were operating at a different level. And so the reason that if you average the 17 different detention centers, they're operating an average capacity of 53%, even though everyone needs beds all over the state, because it practically isn't really possible to operate any further, any higher than that. And we saw that in Johnson County too. In Johnson County, they have a large male side, large female side, small male side, small female side. And she doesn't use the small male or female sides at all because she needs them for isolation. She said, if I have a child screaming all night long, then I need a place to put him. And so I don't know if y'all know the CEO from the YOC in Delaware County, but he thinks that it would be wonderful if we open this. But he also said that we would definitely not break even. It just isn't really possible for these smaller detention centers, in his opinion, with his experience. I did see that Vigo County runs almost full capacity. So does Clark County. And I don't know if you know anything about the details of those detention centers, why they're able to accomplish what other detention centers are not. But the rest, hardly ever over 50%. Those 2 pull up the average. If you take those out, it's under 50%. So I don't know what's unique about those, if anything. Another comment, this was interesting too, just for informational sake. I guess because of the law right now, they're not detaining very many females. I don't know if you agree with that. That was what okay. Okay, that's what the YOC director said. He said that he felt like our female side would sit much emptier than the male side. For females is Okay. limited to males, but there's no Okay. law stating you can't hold females. the Okay. same way as Okay. males. So he said if we did do something, his recommendation, and he's really familiar with the building because he was there with True Harbor, would be to turn the intake into something for females and then have 2 male sides. But the way it sits right now with just one large female side, one large male side, just no way we would ever keep it anywhere near capacity enough to break even with the expense.
I was also going to mention that the Abraxas proposal was sent to Andy and those costs were included. Basically, we were 40% higher in costs by outsourcing things to Abraxas. And basically they would staff it for their, estimated capacity, I guess, and it was our responsibility to fill those beds. So we were paying the bill whether the beds were full or not, is what it looked like out of that proposal. So,
As if we don't contract with other counties for numbers of beds per day.
right, we would be
That's
responsible for
all
doing that.
Contract with other counties and hold a few back for Henry County.
Sure.
I have a question.
So that scenario is not included in this because we were going, I'm assuming,
Point with the Braxis where we.
Right.
Say we're gonna pay you rent, you charge the county.
Right,
this
we-
much, or they're not gonna pay us rent and they give us a break on the per diem for each bed.
right, we didn't get,
Never got to that point.
right.
My understanding, Shannon, you went down and spent a day in Johnson County. You indicated their council actually budgeted an amount because they were not making money or they were losing money, as Susan said, a lot of them may be. But they're charging 200 a day. But do you remember how much they budgeted?
Right offhand, I don't. It was,
$1.5 million.
yeah, I was gonna guess 1.5 million. I'd have to go back and look. I have that number. But that's a $1.5 million contribution from the general fund to operate the facility.
So they apparently, as a county, believe it's important to do that.
They subsidize.
They subsidize it. So Delaware County, they're not operating at capacity. I don't know what the history is of Delaware County, why they cut us and others off. I think the commissioner said they're losing money and enough's enough and we're going to prioritize Delaware County, but that may be inaccurate. I don't know.
So the YOC, the Delaware County contracts beds with the YOC, and I think that Delaware County's contract is over 500,000 for a guaranteed number of indefinite seats, which I think is an excellent deal for Delaware County. But I talked with YOC about that, and they subsidize that with other programs that they run, like True Harbor, like other housing programs that I forget the names of. And then I think they get private donations also. So YOC is independent and they provide the service to Delaware County. And, but that if you think about what we're paying 200,000, 150,000, 200,000 to roll 4 to 6 kids. And they haven't open. He said they average 12 Delaware County youth there for 500,000+ a year. It's pretty
Didn't
pretty
we,
good deal for them.
Susan or Judge, didn't we at one time have 10, 12, 14 budgeted or?
That many beds. We contracted, I believe, for around 8 at one point, maybe less.
And we utilize that. I mean, it probably fluctuated, but generally,
Fluctuated, and back in the day, they would let us roll over any unused beds to the next year. So we didn't lose out on those beds.
do we have any,
They ended all of that.
He did say they're open to starting to keep our kids again, to talk about
Keeping our kids.
contracted contracted beds. They're willing to talk contracted beds again. Yeah.
Contracted with several counties back then.
Yeah.
We were one of the last that stopped. We had a good relationship with them up until.
There's been a lot of changes up there.
Yeah. When I look at this decision, I see it as 2 different questions. The first one is, will it break even? And then is it something, if we don't think it's going to break even, is it something we want to fund from the budget? And I have spent a lot of time looking at the numbers, and I don't think that this is going to break even. And so I think then the question is, so from my perspective, then the question is, would we want to pursue it anyways with budgeted dollars?
make a couple comments about the report. On page 8, I think is the first spot where it talks about utilization. Reading it correctly, it's talking about holding 12 beds in secure detention for Henry County and 18 for non-Henry County. I think 12 is probably very high. I just talked to Susan a minute ago. I don't know that we've ever had, at least since I've been in Circuit 1, 6 kids in secure detention at the same time. I'd say it's probably 2 to 3 most of the time. And then the same thing on the emergency shelter care. I think that number is very high too, to hold for Henry County youth. So that would free up some extra beds to try to contract with other counties. That might help some. Also on page 8, staffing. They've listed teachers, 3 teachers. In the past, we have been able to work with Newcastle schools where those teachers were provided to work at the youth center at basically no cost. The school's willing to do that because they get credit for that as far as the average daily student population. We've not specifically talked about that, but on all of our conversations with folks at the school, they, I believe, are willing to try to work that same type thing out. So that would take the cost of any teachers off. It doesn't list anything about any potential for transportation. A lot of the other counties that would contract would be willing to pay more if we had transport available, so they don't have to send deputies over to pick up the kids. It also doesn't talk anything about medical. I think probably we would at least want to have a nurse there most of the time with a potential for a doctor on standby. So that might be something that could affect the amount of what the
We'd
cost
have
is going to be.
for licensing, Jeff.
Yeah, DOC, and I'm sure DCS is probably going to insist on that.
I think I talked to Steve, gosh, year and a half ago. There've been estimates on what's needed as far as renovation, and this report has 2 million. It has to be a very wide open estimate, and also mentions putting it in debt service. I'm not sure how that would all work. Did you ever get estimates, or is it a moving target, or?
Still is a moving target, and we are fixing things as we speak, because whether you do anything with the building, whether it sits empty or it just sits there and we grow shrubbery around it, we have to pay for the maintenance and upkeep of that facility, or we might as well just tear it down. So that cost is, my opinion, irrelevant, because it's got to be spent whether you like it or not. So it varies. Debbie, what was the utilities?
Well, a lot of times the water bill's anywhere between $600 and $1,000 a month, because we have to keep it on for the sprinkler system. The electric bill, it was like $600 a month. I have to go back and look. It's outrageous what we're paying on the utilities. Yeah, because we have to keep them on, we can't turn any of them off, and we have to keep the water supply for the fire sprinkler system.
So that's why I said whether it's being utilized or not, it's costing us money. So if we're not getting anything, it kind of defeats the purpose. So at least if we're getting something as far as a revenue stream of some sort, it's better than it just sitting there, because we're still paying whether we're doing anything with it or not. I just spent a bunch of money as far as the county. We replaced furnace in the back end of it because it went bad. And it's brand new, hasn't even been operated other than test run it. I've got circuit boards being replaced on boilers right now. I've got sensors getting ready to be fired up and changed. I get a bill for that for $1,000 to find out where the chiller stands and what needs to be done there. I've got sprinkler heads that are being replaced because of when the winter came, we had frozen pipes because of a power outage. And when those things happened, it caused some water lines to freeze and some sprinkler heads to be frozen. So I've got those things being replaced. So those are things right now that are being done to the facility, whether it's being used or not.
But you can't mathematically say any income would be helpful if you start a business that has more expenses than income to help support the maintenance on the building, because then you're just flowing more money out.
It depends on who's paying the maintenance, whether we're doing the work or whether we got somebody that we're paying to do it and how we negotiate that.
So from your perspective, Abraxas is still a viable consideration.
I don't know
Yeah, I-
whether,
I guess it's probably not. I've not had further discussion with them recently, but we heard that they had bought Southwest Youth Villages down in Knox County. I checked earlier today, there's nothing on the Braxis's website or anything that talks about what they're gonna do with it. So I don't know whether they're talking about reopening it as a youth center, or one rumor was that it was gonna be an ICE juvenile detention facility for ICE. I don't know. Also, I heard that they bulldozed basically all the buildings there and they're gonna start from scratch. Lawrenceburg, I've talked to the judge down there. They're talking about possibly trying to partner with 4 other counties down in southeastern Indiana about building. They have a facility in Lawrenceburg now, but they're talking about partnering with the other counties to start a new one somewhere down there. But that's, I would think, 3-4 years down the road, even if they get it approved. Susan got a call from Rush County a couple of weeks ago that they wanted to know where we were, because if we weren't gonna be moving, they wanted to look at, I think, their old jail, possibly refurbishing it for youth. So,
And Susan, in answer to your question, are we willing to budget money to help support this? What price do you put on youth and families all over the state? Not just in Henry.
Susan, I can barely hear you. I'm sorry. I don't know if you're moved back from the box, but I'm sorry. I couldn't hear a word you said.
talk into the magic box.
Box. I said in response to Susan's comment about, do we want to budget money into reopening the youth center and running the youth center? My question would be, what are youth and families worth across the state? And I can't think of anything better to put money into, because in the long run, if we provide the services necessary, the hope is to prevent those youth from moving down my hallway and moving into the adult Department of Corrections. And that's going to cost you a lot more money in the long run. It's an investment in the future.
I do have a question, Judge. I know you said you haven't talked to Abraxas, and my guess is they walked away from the table because we delayed so long, is my guess. Would there be any opportunity, because we didn't get to the point, so trying to use Abraxas's numbers or what is in this report of Abraxas, because we never got to a final point, would it be worth bringing them, or would they potentially be interested in coming back into the conversation? Because it's, I'm not poo-pooing the numbers of this report, but they don't have all the numbers that would have potentially come in.
I don't have a problem, and I wanted to see what happened tonight before we
Mhm.
called back and said, hey, are you guys still potentially interested? So I guess I'm open to contacting them and then
Mhm.
let you know.
Well, I guess my question was, did they walk away because they thought it was not feasible, or did they walk away because we didn't make a decision?
I think they basically, my last conversation with them was, I will update you as soon as I have any other information.
Thank you.
I don't have any problem in talking to them to see where they stand.
The,
They've got a lot of time invested in this. They sent, well, the CEO came out first, and then he sent out the actual person that does the day-to-day operations. I mean, we've had probably 7 or 8 people come out from Abraxas and spend the day and go through stuff, and then we met and talked about different things. So I don't know. When I heard about potentially they were looking at Southwest Village, it doesn't sound good. Yeah,
That's my thought as well, is that doesn't sound promising, but it was worth asking. I think Andy has a question or comment.
Oh, I just wanted to say, if you're thinking about maybe considering a private operator, you might want to consider drafting a request for proposals and making it available to a number, there's other potential operators in this space. And you might make it available to other potential operators and see what kind of proposals you might get. If you're open to a private operator.
And I think the reason why we have to consider whether or not it's a good idea to spend budgeted funds is that it's not a question of whether or not I value children, because I've dedicated my entire life to valuing children. But we're going to be asking the taxpayers to pay for this investment. So if we're going to raise taxes to fund this to the tune of $1 or $2 million a year, we're asking every family to take $200 out of their budget, which they'd like to spend to feed their children. And so the question of whether or not we should fund it with tax dollars is really important if we are not convinced that it's going to break even. If we're 100% sure it's going to break even, then we don't have to ask the question, do we need to raise taxes to do it, or should we raise taxes to do it? If we're not convinced it's going to break even, then we're talking about taking money from people who need that money to invest in their own children. And that is an important discussion to have. That was the origin of my statement.
Sounds to me like if the average of the 17 that are open in the state is averaging 53%, if that's accurate, which it probably is. And
My question about that is, we had 2 young men picked up a couple weeks ago with guns, so they were both going to go to secure detention. I think probation officer contacted at least 6 of those facilities that are closest to us, and they all said no. And finally, Susan has a relationship with Johnson County, so she called the director at Johnson County, and they said, we can move 2 spots and get you those 2 spots. So I don't know what these other, I have not dealt with most of those because of the fact that you're going to find spaces somewhere else. I mean, I dealt with Hamilton County, Delaware County. We've had one in Howard County, Johnson County, Madison County. We've had 1 kid there. And you guys were here. I just have a hard time believing that it's 53%. Because we can't find people when we're calling on the weekends. So we don't have any beds.
We asked
And
the direct,
everybody.
yeah, everybody says the need is
everybody
huge.
says, yeah.
And we asked the director at Johnson County that exact question. Why? Why are you operating at 50% capacity? And her response was, this facility doesn't operate well above 50% capacity. It's hectic and confusing, and she doesn't have enough people to take care of things. So they limit it back based on the personnel that they have hired. So could it operate that way? Absolutely. I think the hiring of personnel becomes a concern. And honestly, I love the idea of Abraxas running it. I love the idea of us doing what's necessary to make that facility usable for Abraxas, leasing them the facility, making them responsible for all of the operation of the facility. They can pay us rent, we can pay them the cost per night per bed, and they assume the risk, not the county. And if that means rather than our $150,000 that we budget to house our youth, we spend $300 to house our youth in a facility that we know is being run and maintained the way we want it to be. But the risk of it not being above 53% capacity is the question of, do we want the taxpayers to fund that risk?
But it sounds like Johnson County has made the decision to not run it.
Absolutely.
50%. That's not a needs based. They've made their own decision not to do it.
Completely agree.
So that's completely different than saying the average across the state is 53%.
That's not what I said. What I said was they made the decision to operate it
I know,
that
that's
way.
what-
I don't know what others have.
According to this, the scenario of 53% kind of indicate, it's not that the need is only at 53% and all these facilities are only running at 50%. People have made the decision because of how it operates to only run at 50%.
I look at it as 50% is worst case scenario. Are we willing to fund worst case scenario? Making 800 and plus $1,000 annually is best case scenario. If it's at that capacity rate, I think we would all love to be able to have this thing make money. We have to be prepared for worst case scenario. If it doesn't, and it's not at a capacity where it breaks even, then we have to fund it with taxpayer dollars if we are operating the facility ourselves. If Abraxas is operating it as a private company and they're just paying us rent for the facility and we're paying to house our youth there, then they assume that risk. If they can put it at 50%, they can put it at 95% if they can fill beds. That's not our concern. The real question is the risk, and are we willing to fund the risk? That's my concern.
That's why.
So,
Go ahead.
I want to jump in real quick if I can, and just let me break down some fiscal numbers, because I think that's my real part is, so we budget actually $250,000 a year for secure beds. Last year we spent $122,470. This is all according to the budgetary status provided by the auditor's office back on May 7th. As of May 7th this year, we have spent a total of $29,235 in the first 4 months of the year on secure beds. Using Shannon's worst case scenario that he talked about as that 1.5 million, give or take, according to Larry DeBoer, when he did the analysis of SEA 1, I don't believe we have the headspace to raise that much in taxes with the way that the state house has changed. Now, I think most of us have paid attention to this, and the municipalities are requesting a chunk of our taxes, even more so than what was originally given to them, and they have a likelihood of being successful. Henry County may actually have to look at cutting our budget in the coming years if the municipalities are successful in cutting into that 1.2% tax rate that the county can pass. Because just to break even and be a net sum zero, according to the economist, we have to pass that tax rate at 1.06. So we have very little headspace left right there. And if the municipalities cut into that, we could actually have to see a reduction in our budgets. So I don't know that the county could, even if we wanted to, fund a 1.5 million without having to make some changes within our current budget.
One of the things you said that Johnson made the decision to run at 50% because that was their kind of,
And
From
others have made whatever decision
Right.
they have
Right.
made to run or
You look at
But
15 of the 17 facilities have made the decision to operate at 50%.
so at 50%, Johnson County has to have from the county budget to general 1.5 million. And according to the Baker Tilly report, if we were running at 50% using your assumptions, we would run 1.8 million in the red at 50% capacity. So what you said about Abraxas makes sense, but what they charge per bed per night is
And
higher than
when,
anything
when we
else.
talked with Abraxas, there was this a continual issue of the per diem rate. Their number was $600 to $700. And that was really why we never moved forward. They didn't come back and say, we can do this for you and we'll charge $300 a night. And then when we met with the other counties, none of the other counties we met with said, yes, we'll pay $700 for this facility. And so I think counties are not willing to pay the cost to run a facility like this, which is why whoever hosts the facility has to eat the difference.
And I think Andy's estimate was what, 240 a night? I read through
I
this
think the 50% capacity was done at 300 a night, but I'll check.
300. And I know it's different for secure and emergency.
Joel said he's not the thumb.
And part of Shannon, that's why when we first started looking into this, why we tried to contact somebody else, because I didn't think the county wanted to bring 50 new employees onto the payroll. So that's why we went to them and said, hey, tell us what you'd be willing to do. I mean, if there are other people out there that are interested in it, I mean, I tried the best I could to track down other places, but it just, I mean, there aren't a lot of places out there. The only way we came up with Abraxas at one time, they were part of Geo, so they've already got a presence here. But that was my thought from the start is, I don't think the county wants to tackle this itself. And I don't know, it's cyclical. Who knows? Right now, we can't find beds for juveniles 5 years from now. So I understand, you know, and you don't want to bring on all the county employees and then 5 years from now, oh, we got to cut all these jobs. So I understand that. I understand the tax situation. I mean, when I look at my taxes, I think the local income tax is getting up there fairly close to what the state is because the state keeps throwing everything back on us here in Henry County.
And Senate Bill
so-
1 put a monkey wrench that wasn't in the mix when you started talking to Abraxas.
And the best option right now would be for DOC to step in and say, hey, we recognize there's a problem. We're going to do this to help fix it. But for whatever reason, the people in Indianapolis don't want to do that. They want to say, the county, you take care of it. You take care of
They
it.
forwarded a lot of things to the locals.
Well, just like we have the Safe Keepers program, or if we have a person, I have a juvenile currently charged with murder who is over in Pendleton, the Safe Keepers program. They told us 6-8 months ago, we're full. We can't take any more. So you got to find somewhere else for these kids now. So it's a crisis right now. Will it be a crisis in 5 years? I don't know.
Probably. It's probably not going to get any better.
But
And I do want to say, when Judge Witham came to, or we had the conversation, I want to say maybe it started in 2023, beginning of 2024. I don't remember dates anymore. I still think it's 22. It was in 23. He did talk to another company as well. So, and they came in really high. And like I said, he said the intention was never for us to run it ourselves. I'm not sure why and how it came to that point. But the intention was never for us to run it ourselves because we knew that it would be way too expensive to do so. And I agree with Judge Witham. If there's other places out there that can compete against Abraxa, or maybe Abraxa is not the answer. But it was never intended for the county to fund and or run this facility at all.
Was the $600 a night when you got that from Abraxas, sticker shock kind of press pause button, or?
well, part of that was when we talked to them, they wanted us to give them, if we could pick anything we wanted as far as programming for the kids, education, all of those things. They asked us to put that in what we're asking for. So that was I guess, Cadillac plan, you could call it. of-
Well, it
of
could
what
be
our-
scaled back.
It could be. But at the same point in time, we wanted, if we're going to open it, I don't want it to be just a jail for kids. I want it to be those other things. Now, the education's a big component of that. There's a lot of kids, if we send them somewhere now, they're not getting that. And that's the one thing we would insist on, and that helps with the school, to do that.
Well, I remember when, I can't remember his last name, Greg was a principal or a headmaster out there. And I think the special ed department of Newcastle Special Services provided the teachers.
Yes,
Bailey, yes, I know he's since passed, but
yeah. So that would, I mean, it makes sense for that to be part of it because the school's going to pay for that. So it's not going to add anything to our cost.
there's not been any conversation with the superintendent or anything.
There has been with one of the assistant superintendents, and I'm
Sherry?
sure they are willing to
Okay.
do so.
Yeah.
So is the $2 million to get it, whatever's falling apart or needs repaired, is that in the ballpark or is that low end, or
I think it's high.
you think that's high?
I think it's $1 million or less.
Okay, well, that changes things a little bit.
So
Those are the numbers that I was getting originally, and that was before we started fixing things, was between $1 million, $1.5 million. And a lot of that was, subjective to what electronics on Jeff's end was going to wind up coming in there. And that depended on who ran it, what they required. And his numbers, when he and I had this conversation here a few months ago, and we were talking what, Jeff, 240,000, somewhere in that neighborhood off the top of head, that was where we thought we could get to get the majority of the electronics put back in there, somewhere in that neighborhood. So it was a lot less than what we had originally anticipated, but like everything else, we've waited this long. I don't know, that might be a little higher now.
It would be 300 if it's 240 a couple years ago.
So,
Why you don't do it?
and so, you know, there's a lot of these expenses. I think we could tame back some, and depending on what programming we're doing,
I agree
Speaking
completely.
of- Go ahead, Steve.
I agree completely that with everything everybody said, especially Abraxas was the original intention, and the intention was never for us to run it ourselves. The only reason that was brought into it is because the cost that were given to us, total expenses from Abraxas, was huge. Huge, 40% higher than staffing it completely ourselves. That's why it was necessary to look at it in a different light. If that's what it costs and Abraxas wants to run it and have that dollar amount, and we are only responsible for paying for the beds for Henry County youth, then that's a no-brainer, in my opinion, even if it's $600 a night. Right? The problem I think that Abraxas will have is other counties, I don't think, are willing to pay $600 a night. Whether or not that they are or are not willing will not be our problem if Abraxas is responsible for filling the facility, not us.
Well, and I believe part of that, in Judge Witham, correct me if I'm wrong, part of those discussions with the different counties, some counties said, we just want secure detention. Some counties said, we want services. So the daily rate would change based upon kind of a cafeteria plan, you know, check.
Yep, a la carte, yep.
check.
I think that's what Abraxas did not want to get involved with, was an a la carte program. I think that was.
They wanted us to be more the negotiators with the other counties.
So to add to that, in Abraxas running it, I agree completely with what you're saying, Shannon. I question the numbers that were provided on this report, because if I'm looking at page 7 under the professional services, which is the labor, and then I look down to that's 61 FTEs. Okay, that's about 59,000 per employee. And by the time we take our insurance and our retirement, our PERF, and our Social Security, Medicare out of that, that's averaging $31,000 per employee. There's no way that number is accurate. I'm not sure if benefits is included into this picture, or retirement package. And if not, that in itself could add up significantly over 61 FTEs.
I'll let Andy respond to that.
No, that's, it includes benefit costs. If it's too low, I can revise it.
Well,
but
I mean, I don't know how you got to that. If you're talking 61, Andy, that's $59,000 per employee. Our average cost for our insurance per employee is about $20,000 per employee. And then you take off about 20% for PERF and Social Security and Medicare, you're down to $31,396 average FTE, and there's no way that's accurate. It's got to be hundreds of thousands of dollars more than that.
okay, then the budgets I relied upon were low.
Yeah, because we're averaging close to $20,000 per employee, per full-time employee for insurance benefits. Because we have, Debbie, what do we have? 186 full-time employees?
Yes.
And our insurance is over 3.6 million, something like that, give or take. That's $20,000 per full-time employee.
Are we still calculating 20% for fringe?
Well, you got, what is it, 11 1/3, Debbie, for the PERF, and then you've got 7 1/2. So I round up to 20 just because it makes the math easier. I always say $1.20 for every dollar, but it's a little less than that. It's like 18%, Kenan.
So the insurance is the big.
The insurance is the big kicker. I mean, and you know, that's always been, we fought that since day one when we came into office, Ken, and our insurance is, and we're doing better. We did have a high claim, we did have an issue this year, and we all know that our insurance went up this year for the first time. You know, it didn't go up last year, but we did have an increase this year. So, but yeah, we average almost $20,000, right at $20,000 per employee for health insurance.
When we started this process, one of my questions was, what would the total cost be per year? So what could we be left holding the bag with at the end of the year? So even though I have also questioned some of the specific numbers on this report, it's about a $5 million endeavor per year of operating expenses. And then my other question was, how full will we have to keep it to break even? And we have to keep it extremely full to break even at this expense, which is Chad is saying is probably higher. And it seems unlikely that we're going to be able to keep it that full. So that was from running it ourselves. It's not a tax neutral decision. And again, the reason why we went down this path was because Abraxas was tired of spinning wheels with us. No one is willing to pay the rate that they were going to require us to pay.
And the judge and Susan also brought up, Susan Lightfoot brought up the fact I didn't see medical really a lot, and it just seemed very low, at least compared to what we're paying in the jail. And
Medical and psychiatric services is in the report. It's on page
yeah,
7.
but 118,000 seems pretty minimal. Now I don't know how you.
Yeah.
My experience is typically public employees are more costly than privately contracted services. And if there's more providers out there than Abraxas, maybe the first step would be to see about getting competing proposals from private operators and see what competing proposals would look like. Because you have a good facility and there are other private operators. Private operators usually do have an edge when it comes to labor costs.
So Susan Lightfoot, we would be required by law to, on psychiatric mental, to utilize Meridian by law or no? I know there are,
We could have
contract with any-
private
Okay.
providers, contracted providers.
so Centerstone or a private.
Yeah. Or
operator.
even an individual hired to just do
To do
that,
it.
like I have in my office. One other thing that I did notice, one thing that we had previously was day reporting. And day and evening. Having trouble with the box and getting this turned on, apparently. Day and evening reporting, which is service that would be paid for by Division of Child Services. So that's automatic income, and that wasn't something that was mentioned in the report. Also, it was talked about in the report to contract with DCS. We wouldn't be contracting with DCS. They would just be paying for several of the services as well as the emergency shelter care beds. We wouldn't have to contract with them.
So that 113.47 that's mentioned from DCS, that's on a per diem basis. That's only for certain.
That's for
Service.
emergency shelter care. And the going rate right now for emergency shelter care is anywhere from $300 to $800 a bed.
Okay.
Because we were paying $800 a bed to Tippecanoe County, the carry home for a youth at one point. When I say we, DCS was paying for our youth.
Susan, I had a question on that. I don't know if you can answer this or not, but is the state pretty good about paying that? Because I know our experience with the DOC and paying like our level 6s, shoot, we were a couple of years behind on even getting reimbursements from the state for those. Is that something they're much better at on that side of the fence, or do you even know?
42 years, I've never seen one bill go unpaid by DCS.
The
That's
YOC, the YOC told me they do pay regularly, promptly when I
Oh, that's
asked that.
great, because we definitely didn't get that with the level 6s.
I think DCS is much better about paying it than what DOC is.
That's good.
Yeah. That's
Andy
good
and
to
I
know.
talked a little bit about the state paying for the emergency beds and at what rate. And Andy, you can fill in your perspective. My perspective was that the state would pay up to $2,000 per night for the first year. And then they wanted us to justify what our cost was the second year, and they would pay only our cost.
Yes, I think
So-
that's right. After the first year, you have to go and show, okay, this is what we're spending.
Yes.
And then, yeah, it could be adjusted after that first. year.
And our, Andy, at my suggestion, put $500 in there. If $500 is our cost, that's what it would be. In my mind, if you're spending $500 and bringing in $500, then that's zero. So, the opportunity to make big dollars on state paid beds is not there. Am I wrong?
No, I think
Not
that's.
after that first year.
Just the first year, yeah. So it's in there
Are we
as
in the
the
job
number
of
of beds
making
for,
profit off of housing our youth? Or are we in the job of breaking even?
sure, as long as it breaks even, I'm good. That's why I'm saying the $800 is what it is, but it's not gonna change the bottom
No,
line.
right. I mean,
Whatever that number is.
Yeah, the emergency shelter care after that first year can't fund the secure detention side.
Right, that's what we found out.
What Chad mentioned earlier that we budgeted, I think he's talking 2025 budget, 250,000 for secure beds, and we spent 122. Is the reason for that lack of availability of beds or some other reason?
I think that's part of it. I mean, we do our best. We've been in the JDAI, Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative, for years now. And that's what that initiative originally was, to try to make sure we're putting the right kids in the right detention. So that's helped some. Our numbers have been down. I think it also is the fact that we have attempted, I mean, that's a last resort. The two kids I mentioned earlier, they're guns and drugs. Well, the thing that's going to get you in secure detention the quickest is guns. And we are seeing more of that at the present time. But I think it's a combination. We're not trying, we are going out of our way to try not to send kids to secure detention. But some kids have to go.
I'm assuming that startup cost of this thing is going to be, suspecting it'd be higher startup than it would be once everything levels out. And a lot of it depends on whether we do a Braxis and what that can be negotiated, maybe down from the 600, eliminating maybe some of the Cadillac services you referred to, but definitely not all, because they're needed. I don't think the question is the need's great. I think we all agree that there's a great need. It's how we're gonna, pay for it and staff it. And I know Shannon's very leaning towards Braxis is the way to go. I came in here thinking a big question mark, knowing how much they were wanting to charge, but.
And I don't know, I mean, just the quick research I did and then talking to other people, that's actually how I got at Braxis. Was Judge Crane had the number for somebody out here at Geo and called them and said, well, we don't do that anymore, but we have a company that spun off from us. Are there other companies out there? I didn't find any when I did the research, but I'm sure there probably are. And then it's just a question of, do we want to associate ourselves with that company? We looked into Abraxas, and they operate facilities in several other states, Pennsylvania, Colorado, Ohio. And so that's how we came up with them. But yeah, I'm not saying it has to be Abraxas. And I understand, like I said, that's why I didn't even think about coming in saying, hey, let's have the county reopen this, because I knew what that was going to do and the situation we're in even back 3-4 years ago.
But at the end of the negotiations with the Braxis, they almost put us in a worse position than doing it ourselves.
well, we hadn't ended the negotiations. We hadn't gotten to the end of negotiations at that point.
Yeah.
The
it was
last
still-
part of the negotiations, when they wanted us to take on the responsibility of securing other contracts with everybody else.
Well,
this is what it was gonna cost you. You guys go figure out how to get it.
Well, but we hadn't finished the
I don't know
negotiations.
necessarily
It got
that was their-
stalled.
We were still talking.
Yeah, the conversation was still going on and for some reason, don't know why, things got stalled and a direction was changed. So the conversation, because I've been in the conversation with Judge Witham and Susan from the get-go. And then all of a sudden, things veered left. Don't know why. Don't know why the questions were being asked and I'm not opposed to questions being asked, but the negotiations weren't even completed with Abraxas before this conversation of getting numbers and feasibility study of us running it ourselves, because that was never part of the conversation at all. In all the meetings that I was in, the conversation was never, we would run it ourselves.
I think we started talking about getting this financial analysis when Abraxas was walking away. I mean, that is the timeline that was
I don't think they
followed.
ever walked away.
They didn't walk away.
It's just more that we said the council or the commissioners and council have requested to have a financial study done, and they said, okay, let us know after you talk to them and figure out what you want to do.
They didn't walk away from the conversation.
So could they come back and say, yeah, we're still interested? I think it's possible.
Well, the Council's just gonna have to, it's gonna get involved by figuring out how to pay for all this
Absolutely.
upfront. And the state's not helping us. The
they're not.
last year and a half, they've
Yep.
kind of put us in a vice, us and municipalities and everybody else. And there's some uncertainties because this is a long session coming up and they're probably going to fiddle with that some more based on how they saw the first year and a half go. I think they're going to do some fine tuning, which is going to affect us and our funding.
I think it's probably going to get worse before it gets better.
I don't think again, I'm going to repeat myself. I don't think anybody questions the need is great.
I would be interested in, obviously, I'm not going to talk to them, but re-engaging with Abraxas or if somebody else to further the conversation, to get better numbers from them, or even if they're still interested. Again, I'm like you, it doesn't have to be Abraxas if there's somebody else. So we can really compare apples and oranges of or apples and apples, not apples and oranges, to the process. That's where I'm at. I would like to have that conversation start again and at least let it complete. At least let the conversation complete. So we get final numbers from whoever it is.
I sense that Shannon makes a pretty strong point that it'd be extremely tough for us to run this facility and hire the employees and take the risk, that maybe that's not the direction that we should be looking at. Am I wrong in thinking that that is common ground belief around the table, or?
Because I think you look back at when it was first opened and things were going very well. We had counties wanting to send kids to our facility. Boone County drove them past Hamilton County to bring them to Henry County because they thought that program was better. And then some laws change and the population goes down. Then we went and said, I think there were 2 different organizations we went to try to get them to come in and run it. Neither one worked out. So it shuts down.
Was that legislative or DOC or both?
It was the legislature that changed the way those were going to have to be run, and a cycle comes up, and then all of a sudden several close, and now here we are again with the need.
The other
But-
concern that I have, sorry, Judge, is when we get these calls, like we did last weekend with 3 boys with guns, drugs, $2,000 in their car, and a missing AK
AR-15.
AR-15.
They found 4 handguns, but not the AR.
And we have no bed to put them in, and we release them, and then somebody gets hurt or killed, then I'm not sure what kind of a situation we're going to be in with liability.
And the ages of these?
15, 16. And the other thing is, I hate to see the facility sit there empty because you got the cost that we talked about. The pipes burst back in December, we had to pay to fix that. So if we're not going to use it for this, is there anything else?
I wonder what it would cost to build that structure now, 20 million, I don't, 15 million.
More.
Know how much it
Yeah.
cost back then.
I know what it costs to build this and it's
This was 23 million.
20% more now than it was 3 years ago,
At least.
at least.
And that's what DOC said when they came out and toured, and same way with DCS. You guys have a really, good facility considering its age and that it's set empty. So much better to try to do something with this than to start from scratch.
Boy, it'd be more cost effective. And you said 1.5 million. I think Steve said 1.5 million would probably get it operational. Is that what you said, Steve?
Said under.
$1 million.
Under 1 million? Well, 1.5 million, because it's always more than you think sense to me.
We were roughly
Inflation.
900 and some odd thousand at one point, and that was considered high, but we figured that some of these things were uncertain. Some of those costs weren't laid out specifically. So I was guessing that we could probably have done it between 1 million, 1.5 million.
Really, 1.5 million, that's the way everything's.
That was fixing pretty much everything in the facility.
Right.
And I think that was one of the other negotiating things we were talking about was how much whoever came in and operated it in lieu of what we were going to get for rent was how much would they pay towards maintenance and upkeep, depending on how we structured a lease as opposed to rental agreement.
But they weren't gonna be part of the 1.5 million. It was gonna be on us, was it not, to get it?
Well, it was,
up
that
to-
was
Part of the
questionable.
That was
negotiation.
That
negotiated.
was part of what we were trying to negotiate was where,
And it was even considered about if another county, Hancock County is one that initially came to mind. If they get a better deal on their contract per diem, they might chip in some of the upfront costs too.
They're the only ones that,
And that
There was.
I think is why Abraxas kind of wanted to say, you guys, they didn't want to be doing that, obviously.
they
There were
wanted,
several counties that made.
So they might contribute upfront.
Mhm.
that were actually wanting to, they were going to give us money
To help.
to help get the facility open, to help cover those costs. So the county, Henry County wasn't shouldering the whole load of
Full
getting the
upfront.
facility up
Mhm.
front, getting,
And that would be difficult. I mean, I don't know if Abraxas could even come in and negotiate.
if the 1.5 million were on us, Chad, what options do we have? We still have a few outstanding bonds, but they're diminishing by the month. What options are there if we had to come up with 1.5 million to get the thing operational in the next 9 months, whatever?
I mean, if it was a quick number, the only thing I know of quick is, what we've got sitting in the unappropriated general fund, which would take more than a quarter of it, wouldn't it, Debbie? About what we have now, about 6. So
At least we
that
have
would-
that.
that would definitely cut into it. I don't know if there's any potential for if all the opioid monies are spent or some of those others that we could look at, I know that they're still doing the finishes up on the bonds, but and there's an option to bond, but again, my concern with bonding on anything right now is what's SEA one going to settle with? And we may
Right.
be able to afford it now, but we have to lay off 10 employees come 2029 to make a
Right.
bond payment.
I know AIC shut down the municipalities, but that may not hold forever. That dam may start leaking.
So
Yeah,
what
I
about,
mean, that's what I'm getting from several is that SEA one came out to hurt everybody, but it appears the municipalities took it on the chin a little harder than we did.
They did.
Those over the 3,500 residents.
Yeah.
So I feel pretty confident they're going to rethink that 1.2%, and they're probably going to shave some of that off for them.
They probably will. Yeah, the schools and municipalities really got hit
Well,
hard.
The schools
Compared
got
with
hit
us.
worse than anybody, but yeah.
Just remember that your bond's paid off this year, your $5 million bond. So if you're gonna bond, you need to bond this year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the thing. If we keep it even for the taxpayers, we need to be looking at that.
so if we talk about moving forward, it seems like everyone agrees that we can't afford to open it ourselves. When I stepped into office a year plus ago, I walked into trying to figure out how much it would cost to get the building up and going, and we hadn't talked about a bond coverage to do that. And then also talking about what a lease agreement might look like. I feel like if we just walk out right now we walk out the exact same place that we were the beginning of 2025. So you guys can't negotiate any kind of contract with a company if you don't know what kind of lease terms we would want on the building. So do we want to, as commissioners, set up what those lease terms would be so you all can go and take those lease terms to different companies? And
You have to find the companies first.
I know, well, I'm just saying, what is a path forward? Because
Whether,
Andy, do you have other companies in mind that would submit if send an RFP?
Not at my fingertips, but I feel certain that there are other providers out there. We'd have to figure out who they are and check their track record. But I'm sure there's more than Abraxas.
I know of at least one other company that Chris Blessinger gave me that she was aware that might be interested, but I don't have those notes in front of me. So I've reached back out to her to see if I could get that information and see if there's an interest there.
Anything's worth talking to them about. I think it really got complex. It sounds to me like it really got complex when these other counties started saying, we'll throw money in up front rather and try to get a lower cost per bed. Is that accurate? That's where Abraxas kind of went, we don't want to deal with that.
yes, I think.
So if that was taken off the table in that, no, we're not going to get money up front from other communities, we're going to negotiate with Abraxas or whatever other company and have a lease that the commissioners agree with and have services that you guys like and a rate that the council is willing to budget and pay to house our youth there. Doesn't that simplify things a whole lot? And they can, then whoever is running the facility can
Right.
negotiate with the other counties for whatever cost per bed they want to, a la carte or not a la carte, or however they want to do it. And then the risk's all on them, not on us. Is that?
I think, and then is the council willing to fund the upfront costs? So is there going to be $1 million available to get the building up and going? Can we set up lease terms? And
I hear you. And I think it's been made a point earlier that we own the building. It's sitting there doing nothing. It's costing us money. If we're not going to put money into it, then we might as well contract with somebody to bulldoze the thing.
I agree.
So
Those are the choices. Yep.
Well, there's
From
other
a fiscal perspective,
not just-
Susan,
rent it to
it's-
somebody
we
else.
don't go straight to bulldozing. I know there's people that want to just go ahead and bulldoze it, but we don't go straight to bulldoze.
I was going from one extreme to the other, so thank you.
Yeah.
from a fiscal perspective, Susan, it's a lot easier to budget a one-time upfront expense and then budget an annual cost that's a fixed rate versus a scale, a target that it could make money. It could lose $1.5 million in money. It makes life a lot easier. Just the 1.5 would not be easy to come up with, and it would definitely take a big chunk of what we have sitting there. So we're going to look at every option on the table, but coming up with a one-time amount versus an annual budget that we don't know exactly what we don't know, it's going to be difficult.
I just want to make a point too. We must fund housing these youth. And in our budget this past year, we increased it from 150 to 200 because we were seeing the costs increase, and we didn't want to have to look back and make an additional appropriation. You know, good Lord willing, we didn't have to spend all of it this last year, and that's great, but it's there. And if the costs come in higher than that, we'll try to find the dollars to make sure we're housing these youth the way that they need to be housed. If it cost us $1.5 million to house these youth, we're going to have to grow a lot before it happens to do that. But if Henry County grew to the point where we were having to spend $1.5 million to house our youth offenders, then that's what we would do. We're sitting in a jail that we pay a lot of money to house our adult offenders, right? So that's part of the responsibility. So I don't want anybody to think that we don't want to fund housing these youth offenders because we want to, we need to, and we want them to get the services as Susan presented earlier so that they're not costing us additional dollars in the future. That makes a lot of sense. I have just had concerns about the risk associated with doing it. So if we can move forward with Abraxas or another company, take the upfront money stuff out of the equation and let them negotiate with whatever cost there is to these other counties, I think we'll be a lot better off. We can budget whatever the dollar amount is to house our youth in our annual budgets and have the revenue from lease agreements and whatever the commissioners come up with for maintenance and all that stuff. Makes things much more feasible from my standpoint.
I think to prove that we really are behind doing that, we actually increased that secure bed amount 100,000 to 250,000. So we realize the importance of it. I'd like to see how we can do this. I think there's options on the table for the upfront. I don't know if it's bonding or tapping into our reserves or whatever, but I agree with Chad. There's some unknowns down the road that are a little dicey. So we have to play a little conservative, but I think this is a high priority for everybody in this room and online. Obviously, again, the need is great and other counties are looking to us. They're hoping that we do something and they're willing to jump on board and pay an amount to make it happen because they have a shortage too. And there's a need that's not being fulfilled. I just blew my mind that you said 53% is the average capacity around the state. Again, that doesn't compute with your inability to find space. So I don't know what's causing that.
They have their own reasons for doing that, each one.
Moving forward, do we need to have some type of an RFP that's got words on it that the judge can take to Abraxas and or find someone else? Or how do we move forward from here?
I think that's the first, is to identify what companies might be interested, and then we'll have to go from there.
It'd be nice if you had 2 or 3 companies because competition.
Competition usually brings that cost down a little.
Should.
I'll say, I think that was part of the issue with the other counties was you got the larger counties like Hancock and some of those that are a little bit better financially capable of paying a little higher rate for bed. When you compare that to like a Fayette County, they're not going to be able to do that. And that's understandable. Yeah, they're.
Jay County that said, we'd like to have the opportunity, but they don't have enough to sign a contract
Yeah.
for even 1 bed a month.
I'll say, and that's where you get into, I think, and that's something, I don't know whether we would put that in a lease or that would be up to each individual county. If you had 7 beds and you're only using 3 in some of the other counties wanted to sublet that bed,
They can
then,
buy it from the other.
yeah,
We did discuss putting that in.
yeah, I
We talked
remember.
about
Because I think Fayette County uses like 1 bed a year. I mean, it's very low.
Yeah. In this scenario we're talking about, though, that would be
Manages
Abraxas's.
that. Yeah, if
choice. We wouldn't have
Abraxas
anything.
manages that,
would be
it's up
part
to
of the
them.
Agreement with the county and Abraxas is that if somebody has contracted 7 beds and they're not using them, that's all part of that agreement between the county and Abraxas.
And you've got to realize
Or
different
whoever
counties have
provider.
different philosophies too. There are some counties that strictly want a kid housed in a jail-like facility, unfortunately. And then there are other counties that have the philosophy that I think we do. We want to get these kids some services while they're in there, so maybe they won't come back or go on to the adult system. So that's where you run into differences. In the same way, we can't guarantee you 100% that we're going to need more beds or less beds because it depends on trends. I knew when our youth center closed, however many years ago, pendulum was going to swing, and here we are. We were going to be right back, and we were going to need all those detention beds across the state. So it's always going to be kind of an unsure, there's no 100% guarantees.
And I think that's
Financially, or
when
trends.
we were contracting beds, I think that's why they would allow us to roll it over because the pendulum was back the other way and they could guarantee the beds. We just roll them over year to year. Cause I think when I first became commissioner, we were rolling them over still in 21. They were still being rolled over. I think they rolled over 21, 22 maybe and stopped in 23.
moving forward with with the maintenance that needs to be done on the facility as it stands, Jeff even talked to Abraxas as to what type of switches and buttons were going to be necessary for them to use. But for us to get the place ready to go, there's a lot that has to be done. And how far do we go in spending that money before we know that we have someone to come in?
I don't think you spend any of it.
Me either.
Just the normal, the chiller, the things that are the maintenance mechanical piece of the building.
Yeah, keep
the essential things to
utilities
keep the
on, keep
building
heat
going.
and air
I was gonna
on,
say,
so it
right
doesn't.
now, that's all I'm concentrating
Right.
on is the things that I know for heat, air, and, electrical, those type of things is what we're trying to keep going, because no matter whether it's a youth detention center, what it winds up being, or who we wind up renting, leasing it to, or however this plays out, you can't rent a house if you don't have a roof on it. You
Mhm.
can't rent a house if you don't have heat. You can't rent a house if you don't have electric. So those things have to be taken care of, whether we have it, whether we lease it to somebody else. We have to maintain those things because it's our building. And that's just part of general maintenance and upkeep, same as you would on a house. So, and those are the things that I'm concentrating on right now, is to keep those things going, because by not having someone in there keeping track of it, it just was pure coincidence that we had somebody in there looking at one of the boilers, and nobody realized the water lines, the power had went out and the furnace at the other end had shut off and didn't restart. And those lines froze up, busted, and we had a major malfunction that we're still in the process of correcting.
And when you were talking to Abraxas, was there at any point where this up to 1.5 million was going to be on them, or is that always going to be on us?
Don't say it was
I
us.
think if we go in with the council saying there is a possibility for some funds to get the building up and going, and if the commissioners create a lease agreement, then y'all can take it and see if anyone's willing to do it under those conditions. And all of the working out of the per diem and everything else is a business model they'll have to come up with. It won't have anything to do with us.
Chad, is there anything we can really talk about specifically until we get the Baker Tilly 5-year comprehensive update and budget time?
Well, no, I don't think so. I mean, we can sit here and hypothesize all we want, but the deal is it really doesn't change until 29 now. So we don't know what we don't know, and they're going to go through 2 long sessions before we get a chance to, it's possible that they're going to go through the long session in 27, and then they're going to go through the short session in 28. Do they make a last minute change? I don't know.
Well, I'm talking about the 1.5 million.
The 1.5 million right now, all I know is that we have that much in the unappropriated general fund.
And I'm still thinking.
Because we're going to, and it depends on, I don't know if we're talking about spending that in August of this year or April of next year. I mean, that would make a difference.
Well,
I mean, if it's something that we're spending next year, then we can try to budget some of that, but we're going to have to make cuts to budget, I'm assuming.
I'm thinking, given what Debbie said about a major bond going off soon, that needs to be a topic that we start talking about maybe at our June meeting. But definitely we're going to have to, we have to start talking about that now if it's going to happen by December.
I know that there are several things that the commissioners would like to see considered for that bond. We've talked about additional building maintenance upkeep funds. We've talked about roads in the park. We've talked about other work in the parks and in any possible way to do, bridges and roads. So I know we've also talked about other funding sources for the bridges. So
Roads at the park are embarrassing.
was this meeting advertised as a work session or executive session? Can we make a motion? Are we taking any action?
I think we're taking any action.
Special meeting.
Yeah.
Work session.
And so no action is allowed to be voted on.
No
Okay.
action can be taken.
Okay.
I would just suggest that we start the process back with putting something together, whatever that is, whoever is involved with that, to take to another private and start that conversation over. Since we never finished it, it stopped halfway through. And actually get true numbers and true things and negotiate the way it should have been done before it got sidetracked.
Also, like, I think a lot of those questions came up was what other counties were 100% on board, interested, what monies they were willing to contribute, how many beds they thought they were going to need. I think those unanswered questions kind of threw a little bit of a wrench into that as far as what Abraxas was wanting. They were wanting a set fixed, this is what we're going to provide. And if anything varied from that, I think they wanted the county to be in charge of that part. And I think we weren't sure what our role would have been at that point. I think that's kind of what slowed some of this conversation down was, where we were at.
Agreed. We were sitting in a meeting in this room and there was a commissioner from another county who said they're not going to pay $600. Yeah, he said, we've got money to put up front, but, and so I understand how it got all convoluted. And I think having a simple RFP or in the contract that says counties will have the ability to sell their reserved beds to other counties, if that language needs to be in the agreement between us and Abraxas or whoever, put it in there. The question then comes, if we're going to lay out a one pager of this is what our expectations are, this is what we're looking for, and send it to Abraxas and any other companies that we might, an RFP, if you will, do we have enough information to create that one page? This is what our expectations are. And if we have that information, who's going to do it?
Well, I think the judge and Susan have a lot of that information is what people were wanting, just from the original stuff from Abraxas that we put together for Abraxas to quote, correct?
We told them what, if we.
You told him,
Whatever we wanted, we told them.
yeah, this was the,
Prepare that.
Service
and-
survey.
yeah. I mean, it's a matter of the commissioners coming, I mean, it's pretty simple. We want to be able to resell the beds, blah, 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 blah. I mean, the commissioners can come up with that list, I would assume pretty quickly. I don't know, Steve,
I think the least term.
another thing on your plate, your plate's not full enough.
So I have a question, what's the timeline?
Again,
And who's gonna keep on the commissioners to get this done? Who's gonna keep on them to get it done?
Mike,
I know Steve's plate's full.
Well, I know, but I mean, there has to be a timeline because that usually I'm the one that gets the call wanting to know why it's not done. So there needs to be a timeline as to
I-
when it's going to be done.
I think you do need a lead commissioner and a lead council member because of the financial and working with you as a go-to. And I
I
don't think you
think-
need all three and all seven, but
Step
It's a-
one has to be that the commissioners create lease terms for that building, because when you go to these companies, they need to know what it's going to cost them to pay for the building to operate their business. And so I know that Susan Judge with them, they know what services they want and they can take those to a company, but they need to know what the lease terms are. And the council is saying now they are willing to consider funding. So I think we need to deliver these lease terms quickly. I'm happy to participate in that. And the council, if you need to have further discussion about funding upfront costs, I think that can
I don't
happen.
think we can have that conversation until final thing.
So we know what's going to be
Yeah.
done with it. Yeah.
Yeah, because right now it's pie in the sky because the ranges of money needed, I've heard over the last year for getting that building ready has gone from anywhere from 600,000 to $2 million, and it's somewhere in between. I don't know that we have actual hard numbers at this point. I know we had estimates in 2024 from Resolve Tech. And I know Jeff had got some of those numbers, but with with all the ongoing maintenance and repairs, that number may be down, maybe up. I don't know. But,
And
but a plan needs to be put into place before the council goes, yeah, this is how much money we're willing to spend, if we're willing to spend it.
I totally agree with Bobby 100%. And I think what would be nice is if the commissioners can get us something together and say, this is what we have to have, this is what we'd like to have, and this is our wish list or dream list or whatever. And we try to figure out what we can actually fund. It would be phenomenal to have that before our budget session coming up sometime in the next few months. But I understand that might be an unrealistic goal too.
I think that the numbers that Jeff got and that were talked about earlier were completely based on how Abraxas would operate the facility. Another company might operate the facility differently. I don't know. You know, it's similar.
Some of that is gonna be like the secure side, it's gonna have to be up to DOC standards. I
Right.
think those are all gonna be.
They'll be
Praxis
similar.
or somebody else,
Okay.
they're gonna have to be fairly similar. Now, the
Good to
emergency
know.
shelter care side, there's probably not gonna be a lot of things that have to happen over there. We did talk about a door being put between the males and females, or some things like that, but yeah,
just
I
would-
think no matter who comes in and runs it, the secure side, it's gonna have to be fairly similar.
It's gotta be licensing on both sides.
Makes sense. So until the final things are put in place with a lease agreement, we won't know exactly what needs to be spent. But from my standpoint, I don't think we need to know that going into a discussion. You know, we need to have the discussion with the dollar amount they're going to pay in rent, how, you know, the lease terms.
So you're gonna wanna find out the utility costs. I mean, you're gonna have a
Yes.
minimum to break even, just utilities and those type things, to figure out
Okay.
what your monthly lease is gonna have to be.
And obviously we want to pad that a little bit because you're going to have your,
Mhm.
You're gonna
Ups
have
and
things
downs.
that
Sure.
go bad and-
Yeah, it's gonna be.
And as far as the services they provide, Joel, wouldn't that be, shouldn't it be a separate agreement?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you have a lease agreement for a facility,
Probably you're gonna have to
Mhm.
do for
an
housing-
engagement agreement for,
For housing youth and guests, that should probably be covered in that.
Right.
And depending on what you guys settle on as far as maintenance and things like that, I think it might be advantageous for us to consider setting up some kind of a non-reverting fund that all those
Absolutely.
funds would go into, and it's that way it's much more
singing music
manageable.
to
in that.
Steve's ears.
Yeah, I think that would be a much better long-term plan for us to come up with something like that.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
I think it makes it a lot easier to cover expenses when you know that money's there, that you don't have to worry about where it's coming out of somebody else's budget if there's a shortfall. I like the idea of the non-reverting fund because that takes a lot of the guesswork out of it for us.
Could you, sidebar, related, but a sidebar, sounds like the commissioners have talked about some projects. And if we're looking at extending a bond, it'd be nice to have cost estimates and especially at budget time.
Right, and if you remember, the commissioners all on bonding, the commissioners always put together a plan and then take it to the council. So that's what they'll do.
So it sounds like you've been talking along those lines.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We'll
Good to-
prepare. We'll
Good to know.
It's like everything else, the needs are always greater than the monies that we have, but it's,
Always.
I think we need to be, we've always been, in my opinion, from what I've seen since being in office and what's happened prior to, and I'm not blaming anyone, it's just the way things have always happened. We play catch up. And
always
I think right now, we have gotten close to a point where we can start to become proactive instead of reactive. And I'd like to stay that way because if we're ever going to get ahead of this thing, we have to stay proactive. And if we don't, we're going to start slipping back behind. And I don't want to get to that point. And state has made it very difficult for us to continue where the progress that we have made.
Agreed.
And that's going to be tough.
Well, I
And
think we have made progress. The state just is tug of war keeping us
yes.
progressing the way we would otherwise.
And I'm not sure that's going to get any better for us. So we have to be very strategic on what we're doing going forward as at this point, because I think our cushions are going to start getting very slim or very stiff.
We've been eating away at our balances and the state's caused a lot of it.
Steve, I feel like the list of repairs that we looked at was pretty rough, kind of like if we use the building for anything at all, we would need to do these things.
Mhm.
It would be good if we had a specific list from DCS, any approving body that needs to license it of exactly what needs to be done. And then we
Yeah.
can,
Susan did that already.
I know you have it and we looked at it and it looked like small things, but when it's hard to send something out to bid or have someone quote it. To me, we could have more detail, but maybe I haven't seen everything that you have.
We had Department of Corrections come out. I've got the full list here. We had DCS come out.
Mhm.
They didn't put anything in writing other than because it was licensed for True Harbor, they didn't think there would need to be many changes.
Okay,
That need to be updated since it's been vacant, or you think it's still good that they base it on?
I
True
think on
Harbor?
the DCS end, we're good, unless there's just been something changed recently. And I'm gonna completely start over to even find the licensing person at DCS, because that
Revolving
has
door.
turned over 10 times over since we started this.
The caveat's gonna be DOC.
I've got their list here,
That's gonna
and
be the
it's,
more expensive side.
it'll be the more expensive side because of the locks and the cameras.
yeah. And that's on the list. The things that you passed me from, was it DOC or DCS? Which one had this short list? It was very small maintenance type of repairs, but we never had them quoted by anyone. We never have it. If we were looking for a number to give to the council, that would still be an estimate as it stands now.
Because it was, right now it's just set up when, True Harbor was there just for females, so there would have to be separation for male and female, which shouldn't be that expensive.
We have four council members here. I think the general consensus, and we're just four, is we'd like to see movement in one direction and enough information that seems like a green light is the way to go. Whatever that may look like. But right now, I don't think we have much of a cost estimate that's.
We even talked about that we might have opened an emergency shelter care site earlier. It's gonna take a lot less work
Right.
Yep.
Less cost.
and a guaranteed pay, at least for the first year.
Yep.
I think that was the part we were all excited
Yeah.
about, was it was guaranteed pay.
Yeah, because I mean, there was very little changes that needed to be made, and that was discussed with Abraxa that, you know, they could, if that was who was doing it, they could move in pretty quickly on that side, while all the other stuff was taking place, generating income.
What would be an average? I know it's like this, but what would be an average from Henry County?
In my mind, I'm thinking 3 or 4 beds on each end at the most for him.
Okay.
And the rest of them can be contracted out as in.
3 or 4.
Right now, we've got 1 in emergency shelter and 1 in secure.
Once in Johnson County.
So not to beat a horse, but timeline, you guys can get something together for,
I'd like to see us meet an hour before our next commissioners meeting and talk with Joel and Debbie about lease terms. Because, you know, if you could get the expenses for utilities, and then we need to have a discussion about not just covering our costs monthly, but how much do we want to cover in case of expenses? And then Shane and I have had conversation about lease terms where whoever's renting picks up expenses, they're responsible.
you can structure a lease,
Right.
a triple net lease.
Right. And
that
so
they
we
have
need
do it
to-
all. It
You can
really,
structure it any way you want to.
really just depends on what you want out. From the county standpoint, triple net lease sounds darn good. They're responsible for everything.
And so I think then we can have a conversation and Joel can draft it and that's a big piece of what they need from us. And then the rest of it is providing the council. I think our other piece is providing the council with a proposal, a cost proposal that they can decide what they might do with it.
If we could have something by,
Set dollar figure, you can allocate repairs.
And they have to cover the rest.
Landlord will say, getting
Up
space
to,
ready for you.
yeah.
According to your reasonable direction, I'll deliver it to you by this date, and after that date, you have to start paying rent.
Yeah, I've structured leases where we'll cover maintenance costs for up to $1,000 for things, and then if something goes beyond that, then they gotta cover it. There's ways to, you can structure a lease however you want, but you guys need to provide that information to,
I think that's the biggest roadblock to get started, and then they can decide how they want to market the building to
Is it
potential
is it
business.
reasonable to have something by budget time in late July? Is that a reasonable time?
We'll have a bond proposal to you guys before budget time, and it will include this and the other things that we've all discussed.
You guys planning.
Oh.
You look like, here, can we go too?
Yeah, another meeting.
Nothing worse than Henry.
Motion to adjourn.
Think we're done?
thanks, everyone.
Or is that?
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
So do I need to? Yeah, go ahead. Really, it makes me sad.